welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be talking about the Mahdist War, 1884 to 1885. This one's interesting. I would hope it'd be interesting. This one's tricky because there's actually three wars that we're talking about here. We're not going to be talking about three, we're going to talk about one, but there's three that sort of get mixed and confused into one. You have the Mahdist Revolt, which is when the Mahdi means expected one in Arabic. It's an Islamic thing. So the Mahdi declares himself in the early 1880s and fights against the Egyptians. We'll get into a reason why in a second. Very close. I just want to cover these basics first. Then we have the Mahdist War, which is what we're going to look at now, which is the British and Egyptian response to this sort of declaration and solidification of power. The Mahdi then dies, and 96 to 99 we have the Anglo-Egyptian reconquest of the Sudan, where we have Omdurman. I butchered that, but anyway, that's the sort of the clean-up type operation where the British come back and beat the Sudanese. The Mahdist War is actually not a victory for the British. They lose. They win almost every single. The British win every battle. The Egyptians lose almost all the battles, but the British win every battle and they still lose. So it's a good example of how you have to be very careful in colonial warfare and warfare in general of actually achieving your goals, not just winning your battles. Anyway, so why did it start? Well, the Sudanese, first of all, in the 1819, 1820, the Egyptians got control of Sudan. And the Egyptians themselves, the Khedivite, they're under the control, they control Sudan. And they impose a taxation system whereby you must pay a certain amount of tax. I'm not 100% sure exactly what level it is. It obviously would change over time. But if you were a farmer, or if you were a merchant, or if you were an aristocrat, you had to meet X. So we have today we have sort of two types of taxation. We have a progressive where it's 10%, 20%, 30%, 40%, and that percentage goes up as you earn more income. And then we have flat tax, which is 20%, 10%. It just stays the same no matter what income you earn. This is more like a base load tax type thing. It's not the official term. It's just a term that works for us, where you just have to pay X. So everyone pays 20 grand. Whatever you make after that, you can keep, but come up with 20 grand. And this didn't really work in the Sudan. Sudan had three big trades. It was sort of it was farming, a little bit of trading, and slavery. Slavery was quite a common practice, quite a lucrative practice. And the Sudanese had this sort of resentment of having to pay taxes to people they were not ethnically connected to. I mean, Egyptians and Turks aren't Sudanese, and so this resentment was there, and it boiled over in the early 1880s when the Mahdi declared himself the Mahdi, the expected one, Islamic prophet, Islamic Messiah type figure, and he declared himself to be the Mahdi, and he rebelled against the Egyptians. But before we talk about that, let's talk about what had happened in the 1870s. So previous to the Mahdi, the British had basically bought out the Egyptian government. The Egyptian government was tanking, and the Egyptian government owned the Suez Canal. The British needed the Suez Canal to be maintained. This is recurrent. The only reason the British were involved in this is because of the Suez Canal. That's the only reason they even bothered to do anything about this. So the British were involved in the Suez, and while they're involved in the Suez, they clean up the slave trade. The British were probably the biggest anti-slavery actors in the world at this point. The British outlawed slavery in the UK itself in 1776. 1807, the passage of slaves on British ships was outlawed. You couldn't transport slaves on British ships. It was death if you were caught doing it. It was death. 1833, the abolition of slavery was pretty much passed in all colonies. Death penalty to transport or sell slaves. And the people that suffered the most was actually the Africans themselves, because Africans, of course, were the ones selling the slaves. White people didn't, as a rule, go into Africa and kidnap slaves. That generally almost never happened. That's a weird sort of modern misconception that these Europeans were going into the heart of Africa and steal. You wouldn't do that. You could just go to the coast and buy slaves from some warlord who had taken them, and a lot of these were coming out of Sudan. So when the British went in there after basically buying out the Egyptian government, or at least the Suez part of it, the British sent Gordon, Chinese Gordon, legendary figure. Won't go into him just now, a bit later. And Gordon went to Khartoum. This is not that time. This is the time before that time. Yeah, we'll get to that. And Gordon went to Khartoum and he cleaned up the sort of slave trade in the Sudan, and that annoyed a lot of people. And then eventually he got sick of it. By 1880, he had left Khartoum. Anyway, so that's just a little bit of backstory. The British and the Egyptians have a war, the Anglo-Egyptian War. The British thoroughly thrashed them in that. The Egyptian army is abysmal. It's terrible. I don't think it wins a single battle. It's really not good. It's awful. And okay, so we're going to start the Anglo-Mahdist War. Let's kick it off. The Battle of Shaykan. This is Hicks Pasha. Pasha is a term like general. It's a rank in the Ottoman and Arab style militaries. It's not a last name. So Hicks Pasha, we see Baker Pasha come up later. Hicks Pasha he was British. He's a European officer, and he led the armies of the Canaanite Egyptians. And he had 10,000 men. They were not being paid. Pay was very much in arrears because the British government was the Egyptian government was tanking. They weren't trained and they had no discipline pretty much whatsoever. I put a picture up there of an Egyptian on the screen somewhere. White uniform with a red fez. And the key to this whole thing, this was a big mistake. It was actually the right thing to do, but it turned into a mistake. The Egyptian army was using Remington rolling blocks. Remington rolling block, for those who don't know, is a single-shot cartridge rifle. So a brass cartridge with a bullet loaded in, fire, eject the cartridge, load another one by hand, fire. But the Remington is possibly the easiest and most idiot-proof thing. You cannot screw up loading a Remington single rolling block. You can't mess it up. If you don't do it properly, it just doesn't fire. And you can't break it that easily. It's quite a rugged and very easy to use rifle, which made it great for when the Mahdists captured a whole bunch of them. But anyway, we'll get to that point. So they're using these Remingtons, a bit of cavalry, a bit of police, and so he marches this army of 10,000 people up to Shaykan, and it's pretty much entirely massacred. The Mahdists just swarm it and kill almost everybody. 3 Europeans got out. Hicks Pasha is killed. Hicks Pasha is dead. Hicks is killed. A newspaper editor and 2 or 3 European officers. Sometimes some sources will say 3, but are they meaning the newspaper editor as well, or the newspaper correspondent as well? 2 other correspondents were actually killed. Like they butchered pretty much everybody. And Shaykan. Why do I keep saying Shaykan? Shaykan is a later thing, so let's forgive me for that. But Shaykan was the one that got this battle got Osman Dinga involved in the war with his Fuzzy Wuzzies. Fuzzy Wuzzies is sort of the Beja tribesmen people, and these become sort of if you've seen Dad's Army, the Fuzzy Wuzzies that Jones talks about, although he wouldn't have fought against Fuzzy Wuzzies. Anyway, they're big afro type deals, big hair with a band, very distinctive hairstyle. I'll put a photograph of something up there. And Osman Dinga, famous slaver. He was a big-time slaver before the slave trade had been knocked out. So he brings himself and his sort of tribal groups into the war, and more tribal groups come into the war. Osman Dinga, one of his biggest things that he did was persuade other groups to get involved. He would, it was like a recruitment drive type deal. Anyway, so after the massacre at Shaykan, we have the first Battle of El Teb. And spoiler alert, there will be a second Battle of El Teb. So El Teb, Valentine Baker. Baker's an interesting character. Baker was actually a British officer, and that's important later, so remember that. Baker was a British officer who was kicked out of the British Army for something that he claimed he didn't do. He actually refused to even address the claims. He was adamant forever that he didn't do this until the day that he died. Spoiler. He apparently was on a train carriage, and there was a woman on the train carriage, and then she claimed that some stuff happened. And so Baker was kicked out of the British Army, and he went and joined the Ottoman Army and fought against the Russians and all this other stuff. And so this ex-British British officer is now pretty much in command of this Ottoman army, this Egyptian army. And he goes in there, and he's also smashed. He's defeated at First El Teb, and he and his officers managed to cut their way out of the fighting. So he and his officers cut their way out, and they make it to the town of Shaykan. That's why I was getting confused earlier. Anyway, so when this British officer, this news got back to the public, papers by this time, you have mail correspondence in the actual army itself, and this becomes a problem later. The British end up getting rid of this. But, well, not entirely, but they don't look at it very favourably. News gets back home to the media, to the press, that this British officer, disgraced and not actually part of the British Army, has been defeated. And so they pressure Gladstone, who is the Prime Minister at this time. Spoiler alert, he will not survive this war as Prime Minister. Gladstone, of course, famously rivals with Disraeli. Gladstone's a Liberal, Disraeli's a Conservative. And Gladstone reluctantly diverts an army coming from, troops coming from India back home, and he sends these troops to the Sudan. Veteran troops, well trained. And he gives his armies to General Graham. Graham has this army now. And the Royal Navy lands these guys at Shaykan, where they are joined by Colonel Burnaby, this legendary, famous Victorian. This is the Victorian hero. Colonel Burnaby is the Victorian hero. He's a balloonist, he's a military career officer, he's a colonel in the Horse Guards. He had just come back from running around all through Russia while the Russians were at war with the British, which was interesting. Burnaby was a legendary, I know I keep saying that, but he's very, very famous. Keep that in mind. So, the Mahdists have just defeated about 20,000 guys carrying Remingtons, so they've got a lot of Remington rifles. The basic, easy-to-use, breech-loading things. They also captured a lot of artillerymen. They've also had a few garrisons come over to them. Remember, of course, these were mostly Islamic troops finding them. Some of these troops joined the Mahdi. So they've got Krupp guns. Krupp, famous gunmaker. They made the barrels on a lot of German tanks. Well, they made a lot of barrels on a lot of tanks, actually. I think some Soviet tanks even used Krupp barrels at some point. Anyway, Krupp breech-loading cannons and a Gatling gun, believe it or not. But the Mahdists were just tribesmen. They didn't really have the skills to... The Mahdists were tribesmen. They didn't have the skills to use these guns. So what they did was they got Egyptian gunners who they'd captured, and they chained them to the guns. Because that's a smart idea. And yeah, keep that in mind, that the gunners that the Egyptians use are not... the gunners that the Mahdists are using are not professional. Well, they are professional, but they're not motivated gunners. They're actually quite motivated to lose. So keep that in mind. And both sides screw this next thing up at El Teb, second El Teb. So the Mahdists know that the British are going to come back. The Mahdists are on a high. They've just won a couple of battles. They're doing quite well, actually. They're doing very well. And so the Mahdists fortify a place along a road, quite close to the first Battle of El Teb. And they fortify this place, and beside them is a refinery type building, a building that is also fortified. That comes up later. So the Mahdists, the first mistake for the Mahdists is that they fortify this area just expecting the British to march down the road into them. It was quite a good ambush. It just relied on the enemy doing exactly what you wanted them to do, which is not a good way to plan an ambush, because they just won't. Baker didn't. Baker just went around by accident. Baker got to the site of first El Teb, and he made a decision: do I go left? Do I go right? And he went left. Sorry, he went right. He went right onto the Mahdists' left flank. So he went to the right, which was a perfectly good decision. And he arrived, to everyone's surprise, on the Mahdists' left flank. He wasn't like directly outflanking them, but he was sort of on the left part of the embankment sort of area, the fortification. I'm going to call it a fortification. It's not a castle. It's just like trenches and ditches. I'm going to call it a fortification for simplicity, or trench works or something. And so they come into contact. He has a quick meeting with his officers where he decides, yep, we're going to do this. And he has an artillery duel. An artillery duel with the Egyptian conscript gunners, the captured gunners. And there's pretty much no British casualties because the Egyptians are smart. They don't want to actually win, so they load canister and they fire high, or they deliberately miss with canister at very long ranges. So the Mahdist guns are silenced. They're still operational. It comes up later, but the Mahdist guns are operational, just silenced. Anyone who's tried to avoid work, or not that I would ever do that, but somebody who's ever tried to, if you really don't want to help an elderly relative with IT stuff, you know how to not. If you know anything about computers, you know how to not make them work. You know that you can just flick the little switch on the back of a wireless keyboard and it's not working. So that's basically what these gunners did. They're like, oh no, something's wrong with the barrel. The breech won't close, you know, because you just turn the screw a little bit, it won't shut. Oh, I don't know, it's broken. Oh, I don't know, we'd run out of ammunition. Oh, this stuff's no good. See, it doesn't fit because they put it in slightly sideways, you know. The big guns stopped firing. And so the British decided they were going to assault this entrenchment position at 2nd El Teb. And so they do, they move forward. The Royal Marines are constantly, in this period, Marines are constantly shock troops. You see it in New Zealand, any sort of colonial areas, Marines are considered sort of shock troops. So some Marines and some British regulars charge forward, and like a mad lad, like a crazy person. He was actually described as pretty crazy later on. I'll be reading a quote from that. Frederick Burnaby, the colonel, grabs his double-barrel shotgun and races ahead of everybody, and he is the first man into the fortification, over the entrenchment walls. So the story goes that the British were sort of flagging. This is a lie, by the way. The story is completely made up. It was just in the media at the time. You will see why in a minute. But Abu Klea sort of anyway. I don't want to give spoilers or anything, but yeah. So Burnaby leaps this. He's inspirational to the men. The men are sort of flagging. They don't want to assault the position, and so Burnaby grabs his shotgun and his sword and he jumps the barricade and he jumps in the fortification. He blazes away, and then he inspires the men to surge over after him. What actually happened was Burnaby ran ahead of everyone like a little glory hog. Jumped over the thing. The Mahdists were startled, like, what is this idiot doing jumping over by himself? He let fly with his double-barrel shotgun, and then he was in trouble. And the only thing that saved him was the Lancasters and the regulars jumping over the wall after him. There's a Blood on the Nile, black powder blood on the Nile, a supplement for the war game Black Powder. Has this quote in it that I'll share with you because it's quite funny. Quote, as happens so often in Victorian battles, what was later written up as heroic individuals saving the army was actually a case of the army saving a borderline suicidal idiot. End quote. And yeah, that's pretty much what happened. Yeah, that's pretty much what happened. Burnaby, being a bit of a glory hog, jumped this thing first and got himself into trouble and got saved. But something happened to Burnaby later in this campaign, something quite bad. And the British government, the British public wanted this sort of hero figure, so they played up his character a little bit. He was a tremendously famous and adventurous type person. So Stuart is in charge of the cavalry. Stuart comes up later with Abu Klea. We're not talking about Abu Klea right now, this is 2nd El Teb. So Stuart is in charge of the cavalry. And Stuart's a famous light cavalry commander. He literally wrote a book on, the book on light cavalry tactics. And so he sees these group of Mahdists on his flank. He sees them coming around massing on the flank, and he figures, aha, we've jumped in those trenches, we've got them in those trenches, now they're running, they're fleeing, we'll loose the cavalry on them. Loose the cavalry on the fleeing enemy. These were not a fleeing enemy, this was an entirely different group who was actually massing for an attack, which he could have easily beaten off with the rest of his men still in a proper square. So he makes a big blunder and charges them with the cavalry, and normally troops who are not really armed with pikes or something, like these are just spearmen with maybe swords and some Remington rifles. So they would probably be easy to ride down. And the Mahdists, the Sudanese, had actually figured out, I'm going to put the Ansar. The Ansar is the army of the Mahdi. So the Ansar troops had figured out a way to resist cavalry. They would lie down or crouch down, wait for the cavalrymen to sort of, so here's our Sudanese lying down, the cavalry would pass, and just before it would clear, they would slash with the sword or a spear and into the underside of the horse, into the back leg, and try and hamstring horses. So the British charged, chaos, charge, chaos, charge, chaos, and then they eventually decide to just get the carbines out, fire Martini Henrys, British using Martini Henrys at this point, so fire with the Martini Henry carbines, use those, and Stuart actually goes around and picks up spears and makes impromptu lances out of the British using Mahdist spears. Similar to what Napoleon did, I believe, at Austerlitz, but they were Austrian lancers. He specifically actually got proper lances. Stuart just grabbed spears. But anyway, so the British are doing a main assault. That's going really well. This cavalry thing has been a bit of a shambles, but it's succeeding. The British cavalry have won. But the British are starting to, they're channeling into this point in the fortification, and they're bunching up, they're grouping up. And if those cannons come back online, if they somehow whip those gunners, or the gunners, somehow they get them firing again, the British are in trouble. If the Mahdists swarm out and attack them, the British are in trouble. So what they do is they fan out. And they fan out. This next thing is I'll go through it and then we'll see what it is. They send the the Black Watch, Highlanders, I want to say led, but the Black Watch are very famous. They send the Black Watch out to their left, where this building is that's been occupied by the Mahdists, and they said, assault the building. And the Black Watch colonel looks at them and he's like, no, not assaulting that, we'll just shoot at it. And they fire their rifles and they see the enemy off. There was no need to assault the building. And the media is a huge part of it. The media is really culpable in a lot of death in the Sudanese campaign. But anyway, the media and the sort of top brass of the army see this as cowardice, and they give the Black Watch a bit of crap for this. But in a sort of minor battle a bit later on, I'm not going to talk about today, the Black Watch actually deliberately charged the enemy when they didn't have to sort of win back some of this honour and glory. And a lot of people are killed because of this. So anyway. And so that's second LTAB. The British have assaulted the fortification. The British clear the fortification out. Kill a few thousand Mahdists. Their cavalry round them up. Now the cavalry are actually let loose on the fleeing enemy. And as they do, they take a few of them out. So Graham has just defeated the enemy. He's opened up a path to Khartoum, where Gordon is currently under siege. He would just simply go and get Gordon out, wouldn't he? You'd think that, but no, he's recalled home. He and his men leave and are sent back to Britain. And in August, sorry, this was in February of 1884. This is just after the siege has started. Gordon believes he can hold on until another army comes in. He can't. By August, Gordon